Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm Tami Stackelhouse, fibromyalgia coach, author, and founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute. The goal of this podcast is to empower you with access to the dream team of experts and coaches I've discovered are key to living the fibro life you love. From the comfort of your own home, and maybe even your pajamas, I'll help you take back control of your life and health. To help out with fibro fog, I always include full show notes and additional resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse, and this is episode 148. Today, I want to talk about how we can find strength and support during times of uncertainty. I've been hearing so many stories lately about unexpected things happening, stuff that you can't plan or prepare for, that you don't expect to ever happen. And people are worried about the economy, healthcare coverage, availability of medications, what the future holds for their children, just a lot of things. And as chronic pain patients, well, we've been worried for a long time. Pharmacies can refuse to fill our prescriptions. Doctors might not believe or take us seriously. And society, it doesn't understand the challenges that we face. There is no shortage of things to stress you out and make you worried. Just turn on the news and you can find a reason to feel unsafe and uncertain. So if that's where you're at today, I see you, I feel you, I am you. And if you're not feeling that way today, well, at some point you will. A lot of life is uncertain. So what do we do when we're faced with those feelings? That's exactly what I want to talk about today. Whether you're listening to this episode right when it comes out or you're listening to it years from now, I'm sure you will eventually be facing some uncertainty. So what can you do? Well, first of all, I want you to know that all of these feelings are very, very normal. Consider these possible scenarios. You go to the pharmacy and they tell you that the medication you need is out of stock and they don't know when or if it will be available. Faced with this information, it is totally normal to feel your stomach drop, to have your heart rate go up, to start having a bit of a panic, to feel like your health is threatened or you're being held hostage by the healthcare system. These feelings are normal. Maybe your company is going through a round of layoffs, so you start worrying and trying to do the math to figure out how you can manage your fibromyalgia if your job is cut. All those supplements, medications, and treatments aren't cheap, and what happens to your insurance? It is normal to be scared, anxious, and feel like you're at the mercy of others, maybe even helpless or out of control. Maybe you get a message that you need to come back in for a second mammogram because they noticed something on the first one. Of course, it's normal to be afraid and to feel fear. And even depending on your family history, you might even be terrified. When we think about these things happening to someone else, particularly to someone we love, we feel compassion. We are so often more understanding with the people we love than we are with ourselves. If it's your best friend's lab results that require a second look, your heart hurts for her, right? You hold her hand, you let her vent to you, you reassure her that you will be there by her side for the whole thing. You let her cry if she needs to cry. But if it's your own labs, well, best suck it up, buttercup. Keep calm and carry on, stiff upper lip and all that, right? People are depending on you. You can't let them down. You've got to hold it in and keep going like normal, right? Wrong. And yes, fibromyalgia is very affected by stress and by our emotions, which is why many of us try not to feel our emotions, right? Feeling our feelings can sometimes make us feel worse. I remember when I was a lot younger, I was dealing with severe migraines. I learned not to cry because when I would cry, it would make my head hurt more because of that pressure that builds up when you're crying. But here's the thing. Not feeling our feelings is its own kind of stress that adds to whatever actual stress is going on. It's denying your body the opportunity to process those emotions so that you can move on. So, just to give you an example of this, did you know that biologically there are things that happen in your body that biologically help you feel better? This isn't just an emotional, psychological thing. When you cry, it actually activates your parasympathetic nervous system. It moves you out of fight or flight and helps us relax. It's almost as if crying after something stressful is the signal that it's over and we can now relax. Crying also releases oxytocin and endorphins. Both of those help relieve physical and emotional pain. Endorphins, those are also called endogenous opioids, which just means opioids made by your own body. So these literally are natural painkillers. Research also suggests that feeling your feelings makes it more likely that those feelings will pass. They call this the paradox of emotion. Unprocessed emotions can actually lead to physical symptoms like headaches, digestive issues, other chronic health issues. And of course, those emotions, when suppressed, they never go away. They still keep resurfacing, right? It's like a body that you bury in the lake and it keeps popping up, right? But if you can process those emotions, feel those emotions, they can dissipate. Another bit of research that I share in my book, The Fibromyalgia Coach, is about a lengthy study that looked at the effects of stress on 30,000 adults over the course of 8 years. So they really followed these people for quite a long time and looked at the stress in their lives. The people who believed that stress was bad for your health had a 43% increased risk of dying. And that's interesting, but not the most interesting part. The people in the study who experienced a lot of stress in their lives, but did not view stress as harmful, were no more likely to die. So let me repeat that. The people who believed stress was bad for your health had a 43 increased risk of dying. But the people who didn't believe that and who actually had more stress did not have an increased risk of dying. In fact, they had the lowest risk of dying. The people who did not believe that stress was harmful, they had the lowest risk of dying of anyone in the study, including the people who had relatively little stress. So stress itself isn't harmful. What's harmful is what we do with that stress, and it's not processing those emotions. That is harmful, which is actually my first piece of advice for you today. Feel your feelings, be gentle with yourself, and take time to grieve. If you find yourself feeling unsafe and uncertain, allow yourself to feel those feelings. Give yourself time and space to process what is happening and what you think and what you feel about it. Be gentle with yourself. Show yourself that compassion that you would show someone you love. Allow yourself to get mad, to be scared, to grieve if necessary. Allow yourself to scream into a pillow or not. Even write a nasty letter to the doctor who was dismissive, but after you write it, maybe burn it. Don't worry that you're being silly or that you're overreacting or it's not as bad as what happened to so-and-so, right? Grief, especially, is a funny thing. We think that it only applies to death, that you are only grieving, quote unquote, when someone has died, right? And even then, It's really only grief if it's a life cut short. If it's someone who had a nice long life, well, of course, that's understandable. We were expecting that to happen. And so no grief, right? But that's not true. Grief is actually about loss. It could be the loss of a job through a layoff. You could grieve that. It could be the loss of a relationship through divorce. It could be the loss of a favorite city or home or friends after a move. Loss of cognitive function could be something you could grieve, or even the loss of some of the activities or hobbies that you had when fibromyalgia doesn't allow you to do those things that you did before. To quote my favorite author, Madeleine L'Engle, from her book, A Ring of Endless Light, to leave a friend is like a death and calls for grieving. Many, many things are like a death and call for grieving. Give yourself the space and time to grieve whatever it may be that you've lost, the big and the small, the tangible, the things, and also the intangible, like the loss of an idea or an ideal. We cannot fix all the things in the world. We can't even fix our bodies, right? We can't fix what's going wrong. Those are problems for God's to-do list, not yours. Certainly, of course, we have to do our part, but at a certain point, it is out of our hands. I can give my body all the building blocks of rest, good nutrition, and so on, but I cannot actually make my body heal itself. I can make my corner of the world a better place, but I cannot actually, just on my own, change the entire world. So give yourself the compassion that you deserve. Be gentle with yourself and allow yourself space and time to grieve what is lost. I also want to add here that grief can come back to you. So be gentle with yourself on those anniversaries, right? I actually block off time and make sure that I don't teach classes or work with clients during the week that my sister died. So honor those times. Give yourself that space, give yourself that compassion, and don't beat yourself up that you're not over it yet. My second bit of advice for you is to double down on your self-care. Don't just practice good self-care, practice extra self-care and go back to the basics. As one of my coaches, Julie, says, what might look like over-the-top self-care for someone else is actually the bare minimum for those of us who have fibromyalgia. We just require a lot more self-care. So when you're in these uncertain times, when you're feeling unsafe, we got to do extra and not feel bad about it. I like to call this unapologetic self-care. Some people talk about extreme self-care or radical self-care. Really, it's about unapologetic self-care. It's about taking care of yourself and doing what you need to do to take care of yourself unapologetically. I talk a lot about this type of self-care in uncertain times in an episode that actually came out this same time of year 3 years ago in 2021. It's titled When Everything Goes Wrong. I had a very sick cat. I had a lot going on. He had heart issues. He needed surgery. And I had to step back from a lot of things and really get back to basics. If you're interested in checking out that episode, we will actually link to it in today's show notes. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/148. In that episode, and when everything goes wrong in life, what I do is I go back to my basics, my foundational things that are non-negotiable. So that means things like getting enough sleep and, if possible, getting extra sleep. Because extra stress in our lives, in our bodies, means extra effort to protect our bodies, right? Our bodies are working harder. Our adrenals are working harder. So giving extra sleep, extra rest gives our bodies that extra protection and support. I take all my medications and supplements on time. This is not a time to skip things. This is a time to make sure that you follow through and do it. Plus, I even take extras of some of those things that I know give me extra support in times like these. Might be things like extra GABA or upping antidepressant, anti-anxiety meds, sleep meds. It could be all sorts of things, but making sure that I don't skip it. Drinking enough water, right? More stress on the body. We want to make sure we're supporting it as much as we can. So making sure we drink enough water. Eating as healthy as I can, but still allowing myself space to indulge in comfort foods because self-soothing, it's a thing, folks. It's a real thing. And things like chocolate do actually do something for your brain and body, right? They'll give you a dopamine hit, which will give you a mental boost. So it is okay to allow yourself to indulge in comfort foods, but also keep in mind, we want to support our bodies as much as we can, eat as healthy as we can. Also, one of my basics is to cut back on the energy that I'm spending on doing different things because it takes a lot of energy being under this stress, right? So this might mean saying no to more things. It might mean putting some things on hold. It might mean changing up your schedule, closing off your calendar, not taking new clients, things like that. When I recorded that episode 3 years ago about what happens when everything goes wrong, it was also an announcement that I was putting the podcast on hold for the rest of the year. So that's an example of putting things on hold so that you can focus on extra self-care. Another basic is increasing that mental health support, just taking care of your mental health as well as your physical health. And this could be things like counseling, it could be prayer or meditation, talking with friends, meeting with my coach, or even, like I mentioned earlier, increasing certain supplements or medications to help provide that mental health support. So, like my earlier bit of advice, be gentle with yourself. This is not a time to double down on being strict. This is hard times, and hard times require a soft touch. So, be sure to include things that you enjoy. When self-care becomes work, or self-care becomes a to-do list that you have to check off every day, that's not actually very caring, right? And we want to bring that care and compassion to ourselves. So balancing doing the things that you know are going to help you feel your best while also being gentle with yourself and allowing yourself to self-soothe as needed. I would also recommend checking out episode 13 about how to add more joy into your life if this is an area that you struggle with. A lot of times with fibromyalgia, we get so disconnected from the things that bring us joy because we're so focused on sometimes just getting through the day, right? And so adding more joy to your life can really, really be helpful. It can be helpful for that mental health we talked about, but it can actually be helpful for you physically. Having things that you enjoy can actually help your pain, help your fatigue, as long as you find that sweet spot in the middle. If you enjoy running, for instance, we don't want to do a marathon, but we could maybe do something little and short. Or maybe we just walk, or maybe we just go sit outside on a bench. Those are all things that I talk about in episode 13. So again, we'll have a link to that in today's show notes. fibromyalgiapodcast.com/148 for today's episode and those links. I would also recommend taking our fibromyalgia wellness style quiz to discover what your wellness style is. This is an exclusive quiz that I designed. It's based on psychology, and In that quiz, when you find out what your wellness style is, you can sign up for a more detailed email that gives you different things over the course of about 5 days, what your challenges are, what the perks are to your wellness style, your strengths, and really gives you some ways to avoid flares and things like that. So, if what I'm saying here is resonating with you, I really encourage you to take that quiz and understand more what your wellness style is so that you can work with your body instead of fighting against it. If you want to take the quiz and sign up for those personalized tips, just go to fibroquiz.com and we'll have that link in today's show notes as well. So, when I am in uncertain times, I find it really, really helpful to talk through all of my commitments with somebody who knows what's going on but isn't involved. So, for me, that's my coach. I'll talk to her about what's happening. I'll talk to her about the things that I think I might need to put on hold, or just talk through how do I juggle it all, right? Since she's not actually involved in any of those things, like I'm not quitting something that's going to affect her, I know she's going to be giving me advice for what's my best, not anybody else's, but my best. But be careful. In these situations, you do not want to be taking advice from people who are also being affected by what's happening, because the advice that you might get might be what they want for you and not necessarily what you want for yourself or even necessarily what's best for you. A good example of that is when parents want their children to grow up and be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, take over the family business, right? But the child wants to be a mechanic or a musician or a teacher. So we want to be careful about taking advice from people who are invested in some way in that outcome, because it might not be objective advice. It might be what they want. So be careful. And it really can be helpful, especially in stressful times, to have that person on the outside who can see that whole picture and support you from that viewpoint, seeing the whole big picture. And when you're working with a certified fibromyalgia coach, you're also working with somebody who knows and understands fibromyalgia. We can help you uncover how your situation is impacting your fibro symptoms, and we can give you practical advice on tips on how to manage your symptoms from how we've managed ours. Because in addition to our training in fibromyalgia, we also all have fibromyalgia ourselves. And that level of understanding and support really can't be underestimated, which kind of leads me to my third bit of advice for you. And that is to hold hope close. And until you can get your own, you can borrow mine. Hope is our light in the darkness. It's our silver lining on a stormy day. Hope is what keeps us going. If everything is a disaster right now in the moment, hope is what keeps us moving forward towards a better future. But sometimes it's hard. It's hard to have hope. So if that's you, if you're struggling to have hope in the darkness right now, I want you to borrow mine. When I was beginning my own fibromyalgia journey and I was struggling to see the light at the end of the tunnel, a good friend told me, until you get your own hope, find some people you can borrow from. And one way you can borrow hope is to hear stories of people who faced what you're facing and came out the other side. This is exactly what I do every time I'm faced with a new, scary, or stressful situation. I go look for stories of people who have overcome that same situation. That is how I borrow hope and strengthen my own hope. If you're the same way, then I would recommend signing up for our Stories of Hope podcast series. This is a curated series that features all of our Stories of Hope episodes, plus all of the interviews with our coaches, students, and graduates, where they share their fibromyalgia stories. They share what they did to get better, what their challenges were before, and how they're doing today. It's the perfect bit of hope to have in your back pocket, like a flashlight you can pull out and turn on when the darkness closes in. You can also find those episodes here on this podcast, but can be sometimes a bit hard to find now that we have several years of episodes. They're all kind of mixed in there and can be hard to find. But if you want to sign up for the series, we will send them all to you as a curated collection. You can look for that link in today's show notes at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/148. So listening to those Stories of Hope episodes, that's part of how you can borrow hope. So keep listening to this podcast. Read my books. If you don't have copies of my books, I actually give them away for free on the podcast website. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com, look for resources in the main menu, and you'll see where you can download a free copy of both of my books. You can also check out our new YouTube channel. The channel is just Fibromyalgia Wellness. You'll find me there. You can also follow me on social media. All of these things can help my hope for you to soak in. Now, sometimes my students and clients struggle to believe that they can feel better. They struggle to believe that anything can change for the better. And you might be struggling with that too. Maybe it's not even about your own fibromyalgia, maybe it is, but you're just struggling to believe that change can happen. And if that's you, I'm going to ask you the same thing I ask my students and clients. Do you trust me? If you can find hope and belief to trust me, I can believe for both of us that you can get better and even that our world can get better. I have that much hope and faith. All of our coaches do that for all of their clients too. Until you have your own hope, borrow ours. I know you can get better. Even though I maybe haven't met you yet, I know you can feel better than you do right now. And that leads me right into my fourth bit of advice, which is to find your people. We cannot do it alone. One flashlight of hope cannot push back all the darkness, but together, wow, together we can light up the whole world. We need each other. We cannot do this thing called life alone. We need to find our people, a community where we feel seen, safe, and supported. This is the main thing I hear over and over from the members of our alumni association. We have a private Facebook support group, and we have weekly coaching calls for our alumni association, group coaching calls. And it means so much to each person to really have that group of people who understand what you're going through, who have been there themselves, who can help hold that hope for you, just like you can hold out hope for them. And I just love watching how our students and our coaches support each other. I cannot be the support for everyone. You cannot be the support for everyone, but we can be the support for some people. And when we get all of us together, there's enough people to support all the people, right? So if you don't have a supportive community that you can lean on, I really, really encourage you to find one or make one. Of course, working with a coach automatically creates a community of two, right? You and your coach. And some of our coaches also offer group options that allow you to connect with others. Everyone who completes our Certified Fibromyalgia Advisor class is eligible to join that alumni association I told you about and be part of our IFCI family. You could also find a support group like the Fibromyalgia Association support group run by my friend Sharon Waldrop. And congratulations, Sharon, by the way. Their group is celebrating 27 years this year. She's been running that group longer than I've even had fibromyalgia. It's impressive. They offer virtual support group meetings. They also have some in-person meetings. So we will have a link to their website on today's show notes where you can go and learn more about what they have to offer. And if you have not found your people yet, please don't give up. Keep looking. You might have to create your own support network one person at a time, and that's okay. Honestly, that's what most of us have to do. I also want to say a little bit here too about the flip side, the people who don't belong in your support network. If there are people in your life who make you feel worse and not better, consider how you can limit their access to you. And yes, these could even be family members. You may need to screen their calls by letting them go to voicemail first. You may need to set better boundaries for visits. You may even need to let go of some people completely and cut them out of your life. Remember, there is no relationship that is worth sacrificing your health and your safety. If you don't feel safe in your home, your body, or your mind, it may be time to make some of those changes. I know this is hard. I am not saying that it's easy, but it may be necessary. Now, those are my 4 main bits of advice for you. But I also want to give you a couple of practical things that you can do to empower you as we talk about health insurance, medication worries, and stigma surrounding chronic health conditions. So first, if you're struggling to understand your health insurance coverage, if you're worried about your coverage and you want to just understand that better, I encourage you to check out episode 111, Understanding Insurance Coverage with Dr. Chelsea Leibowitz. In this episode, Dr. Chelsea goes over all the insurance terms, things like deductible, copay, MOOP, right? Out-of-pocket expenses versus in-network versus out-of-network, all of those terms. She covers all of that. She also explains why your insurance may not be covering certain things and what you can do about it. There is some really great stuff in that episode. If you're at a point where you're even thinking about signing up for different insurance, we just did that. My husband's work, it was just time to sign up for next year's insurance. We just finished that. So if you're in that place, this is a great episode to review or even to bookmark and come back to next year when it's time to choose your insurance. The link to that episode will be in today's show notes. So just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/148. And when it comes to stigma around chronic health issues, we can't talk about that without also talking about ableism. If you're not familiar with the term ableism, it's like racism or sexism, only we're talking about able bodies instead of talking about race or sex. So in essence, ableism is when society favors able-bodied, healthy individuals and marginalizes those with disabilities and chronic health conditions. Here is an example of ableism. There are people who believe, consciously or unconsciously, that if you're sick, it is your fault. They might not say it that way, and if you asked them, they might even say that's not what they believe. That would make it unconscious. But the underlying belief here is that you can be thin and healthy and fit if you just want to be and if you do the work to get there. You probably see a lot of this on social media. There's also this belief that you can cure any illness naturally, and that somehow you're cheating or you're not as good of a person if you need to take medication. The underlying belief here is that medication is bad and natural is good. And again, you can get there if you just want to and you do the work, right? So, for example, it's bad if you take metformin for type 2 diabetes because you should, quote unquote, be able to manage type 2 diabetes with diet and exercise alone. But that's not true. Some people can't for lots of reasons. Another example, it's bad if you have to take pain medication. You should be able to manage your pain naturally. If you just get healthier, eat the right things, take this supplement, pace yourself better, all of this stuff, you should be able to manage your pain naturally. One more example for you. It's bad if you take medication for depression, or if you need to go to a therapist or a counselor, because the underlying thought is you should be able to manage your depression and your emotions by changing how you think. In all of these examples, we're elevating those people who are thin and fit and healthy and not on medication, and we're marginalizing people with disabilities, with chronic health conditions, and those of us who use medications. Sometimes ableism is very, very subtle. It could be as simple as somebody saying, "But you don't look sick." Sometimes it's more overt, like there's no handicapped access, no handicapped bathrooms, right? Sometimes it's that obvious. And with this culture of ableism, it can feel really unsafe to be a person with a chronic illness or a disability. And clearly, this has got to change. If you want to learn more about health discrimination, about harassment when it's relating to your health, then I recommend checking out episode 125 with attorney Meredith Hawley. She talks about how to handle some of those things, what health discrimination and harassment is, and all of that. So it's a great episode to check that out. But you can also be part of that change. You can be what's called a patient advocate. This is someone who helps patients navigate the healthcare system, ensuring that they receive the care and the support they need. Many times, patient advocates also provide education to those around them about the patient's health conditions. For example, you can advocate for others by advocating for yourself. When you explain to your physical therapist about fibromyalgia and ways they can help you get better without putting you into a flare, you are equipping that therapist with knowledge that will help another patient. When you wear purple for Fibromyalgia Awareness Day or ask your state's governor to make a proclamation for Awareness Day, you're advocating for others and bringing more awareness to fibromyalgia. When you share my podcast or your books with your providers or watch the fibromyalgia documentary, Invisible, with your family, you are being a patient advocate. When you meet with your senator or your representatives to share your fibromyalgia story and explain why we need more funding for fibromyalgia research, you are advocating for all of us. If you want to learn more about patient advocacy, I've got 2 episodes for you to check out. The first one is with Melissa Talwar of the National Fibromyalgia Health Organization. This is episode 132, and it's titled Advocating for Fibromyalgia Research Funding. I also interviewed Anne and Lily Garner. They are one of my coaches and her daughter, and we talked about their experience going to Washington, D.C. as advocates. You can hear their interview in episode 134, The New Face of Fibromyalgia Advocacy. So, like all the others I've mentioned, we will have links to all of these episodes and resources in today's show notes page. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/148. And one of the best ways to be the best advocate you can, both for yourself and for others, is to educate yourself, to learn all that you can about fibromyalgia, about yourself, about your illness. So, as part of that, I want to invite you to join us in January for our Fibromyalgia Wellness Summit. This is an exclusive 10-day event, which will feature me along with 6 of my coaches, and we will share our stories. We'll share about the things that we've done to get better, and we'll share the things that we teach our clients. This summit is going to be unique for several reasons. So if you've attended other summits in the past and for whatever reason didn't get what you needed out of them, I do want to share with you why this one will be different. First of all, every single one of our speakers is someone who has fibromyalgia and who has found ways to feel better. It's not going to be a bunch of talking heads, a bunch of doctors who have never experienced what we do. We are patients, but we're also experts, right? Before we became experts, we were patients, but we do also happen to be experts. And so this also isn't just a panel of patients who are still struggling. We have found ways to get better. So you'll be hearing from real people who really have fibromyalgia and who have had real improvements in their symptoms. To give you an example, our coaches, when they graduate from their training program, on average, have been able to improve their fibro symptoms by about 75%. Now, that's by the time they graduate. Of course, they keep improving from there. And some of us even have our fibromyalgia in remission, which means no symptoms. The second way this summit is going to be different than maybe other summits you've attended is that it's for fibro people. So we want to make it fibro friendly, right? Like that just makes sense. So we will only have one speaker each day. You will also receive, in addition to the one talk for each day, you'll also receive a second recording, which is me interviewing our guest speaker about their fibromyalgia story. This will give you a chance to get to know them beyond just hearing me read their bio. We really want this summit to give you actionable information that you can put into practice. And we also want to give you some of our hope by sharing our stories. What we don't want to do is turn on a fire hose and give you so much information and so many speakers that it's overwhelming and unhelpful. So again, it'll just be one speaker each day, along with an interview, me asking them about their story. Third, this is the third way our summit is going to be different. This summit is going to be held as a private podcast. A podcast, yes. That means that once you sign up and you add that feed to your favorite podcast player, so wherever you're listening to this right now, you add the feed to that, then each day's episodes will automatically appear in your podcast app for you to listen to whenever and wherever you want. Once you listen to this podcast, right, you listen to this podcast, you know how podcasts work. And this summit is going to work the exact same way. And if you choose to download those episodes, you will have those recordings forever. I don't know if any other summit has tried doing it as a private podcast, but I know for sure it's the first Fibro Summit to be held this way. And I am super excited for how fibro-friendly this is going to be for you. All of this is going to be free for anyone who wishes to sign up, but we will also have a special paid VIP level with extra perks for those of you who like the extras. I'm an extras person. So this will include our own private pop-up Facebook group where you can interact with the speakers and other summit attendees. You can access video recordings with our guest speakers in that group. There will also be a VIP exclusive live class taught by yours truly. We'll also have some bonus VIP exclusive episodes with some very special guest speakers and all sorts of other goodies. So if you are ready to sign up, go to fibrowellnesssummit.com. Now, make sure you get 3 S's in the middle there between wellness and summit. So that's Fibro Wellness Summit with 3 S's.com. I'll be sharing more details over the next few weeks, but feel free to reach out with any questions and definitely go sign up for our wait list so that you can register for the package that you want when we open registration. This really is a great way to educate yourself so that you can be your own best advocate and maybe even help some people along the way. So, what can you do to find strength and support during those times that feel unsafe and uncertain? Another way to look at this is, how can you be as safe and certain as possible when the world around you is unsafe and uncertain? And some of the ways that you can be safe is to first feel your feelings, be gentle with yourself, and take time to grieve. Second, practice extra self-care, unapologetic self-care, and go back to the basics. Third, hold hope close. And until you can get your own, borrow mine. Number 4, find your people. We cannot do this alone. And on a practical level, if you're worried about your healthcare access, medication availability, or facing stigma and ableism, the best thing you can do, as I said before, is to learn all you can and become the best advocate you can be. And today I've given you a long list of additional episodes to check out to get you started, along with the link to sign up for our wait list for our January Fibromyalgia Wellness Summit. As always, we are here to help. You can schedule a consultation with me or with one of my coaches at findafibrocoach.com. We can be your advocate, and we can provide you with that non-biased advice and experience from having lived it ourselves. And if you're interested in helping others, I would invite you to consider joining our training to become a certified fibromyalgia coach. I've actually put together a special Be a Coach podcast series, and it goes more in depth for what that means, who makes a good coach, what our training includes, and more. Again, there will be a link to sign up for that special series at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/148. Now, as you know, I always try to share a listener shout out in each episode. These are real reviews we've received from real listeners. And I'll tell you, I planned out today's podcast episode and what I was going to share with you before I picked our listener shout out. And when I saw this message, I knew it had to be the one to include today because she talks about her Hope flashlight. Now, this is from Heidi in Colorado, and she says, I just found the podcast, and I already feel more educated than any doctor I've talked to about this condition. I honestly can't thank y'all enough just for giving me some hope. I am now determined to get back my life. I was at the brink of giving up. I am now taking baby steps towards a better life. You gave me a flashlight so I could see the path. I know I have to do the work. I now know at least where to begin. Thanks so much, Heidi. I know it's been a few months since you sent that in, so I would love to hear how you're doing today. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this. It is one of my core beliefs that something good can come out of everything. The lotus blossom is only as beautiful as it is because it had to push its way up through the mud and the muck. The butterfly can only fly because breaking out of its cocoon, that struggle, builds the strength in its wings. We only get lightning when there's a storm. So It may be dark right now, but dawn is coming. And I have enough hope and enough faith for all of us. If you don't have your own hope yet, borrow mine. I love you, and I'll see you back here next time. And that wraps up another episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse. For daily doses of hope, inspiration, and practical advice, come hang out with me on Facebook. Visit facebook.com/fibrocoach to find my personal coaching page and connect with me directly. To find the show notes, additional resources, or to schedule a consultation with me or one of my coaches, visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com.